tuning in for the Wednesday night hump. I hope you guys have had yourselves a lovely week so far. It has been miserable weather here in the Netherlands, this particular part. We've had rain continuously all day, so it was a little bit of a downer grade day. But other than that, I'm warming myself up by being here with you guys. Always good to be here with you. You know, in your human existence, time is your time is actually one of the most valuable things that you have. For you to spend a little bit of yours with me is greatly appreciated. I promise I won't disappoint. Promise I'll keep it interesting. Mr. Watson in the house. How you doing? Mr. Bogfoot, as always, cheers to you. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm so glad that you've made it to Wednesday Night Hump. Um, I started my guitar safari um, recently, and again, and one of the things that I noticed that I'm noticing in the Japanese market is the prices are dropping and significantly, significant enough for me to take notice of it. And hey, Ben, how you doing? Welcome to you, sir. Um, enough for me to take notice of it because, of course, that's my business. What I do, I import, export vintage Japanese guitars. But it's very interesting to me that uh, the prices have gone down about 20% across the board. Now, this is a good and a bad thing for me. I won't get into that aspect of it tonight. We won't get into that digression. But what I will say for you as a consumer, it's a weird thing because if you're in the states, probably this is one of the best times for you to get into a vintage Japanese guitar. Which, by the way, you know, the quality is such that you would not be going wrong. Uh, Granted, you'd have to have somebody guide you and to help you pick the one out that's best for you if you don't know. But other than that aside, this is one of the best times. And because of the terrorists, that venue is being blocked. But because of the terrorists and that venue being blocked, the prices are falling for everyone else. The exchange rates right now, I just did some yen exchange myself, and it's between the euro and the yen. This is probably one of the strongest periods I've had in terms of my buying power. Kumar, hello to you. Living life, hi. How you guys doing? Welcome to the chat. If you're in Europe, this is a golden hour. This is a good time for you, I'm not saying through me, but for you to think about getting yourself, that instrument in Japan if you were thinking about getting it. I don't know how long this window will be open. From my experience, not for long. But yeah, do you have Roblox? Roblox? I have no idea. Yeah, Scott. It's borderline. Giddy giddy, as the Japanese say. Living life. Kind of giddy giddy there. I got my man Scott keeping his finger is hovering over the keyboard right now. I can feel it. Yeah, Haley, how you doing too? Well, folks, anyway, bots are not the bots are generally welcome here as long as you keep it civil. But yeah, if you live in Europe right now is your moment. You know, you know, you can pull it off relatively cheap. Poised and ready to strike. Yeah, I can feel it. I can literally feel it. So there's that. I want to open by saying that to you. If you're in the States or if you're in Canada, maybe I'm not sure about what's going on there. Obama, is that you? Yeah. Yeah, that one was great. That was definitely going to get blocked. You gotta come with something more original than that. And I'm wearing my glasses tonight because I have a cold. I went to go see, I told you guys this. I went to go see Sleeping Beauty ballet, and half of the audience was kids. And let me tell you something, you do not want to put a guy like me who lives in relative isolation in a room full of kids, 'cause I'm bound to get sick, which I did. So I got my glasses on tonight. Richmond said hi. Well, welcome to you from Richmond. Welcome. It's always good to hear from Richmond. Yeah, so just there. I don't know how it is in Canada, but the States, you're kind of out of that play. But if you're in Europe, it's the time to do it. I can say that pretty much well across the board. I'm sure people, yeah, I got that. Yeah. Welcome to you from Richmond. Um, it's always good to get people from all over the world. We're here in Amsterdam. We're coming to you live. It is 11:05 p.m. in the evening and Central European time. And I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this channel. Um, well, I think that tonight's discussion is part two of my depressing conversations for older musicians. If you're a younger guy, you can benefit from this by listening in, but I thought that I would piggyback on a discussion I was having on Sunday night's live stream on a topic that I lightly touched upon in that, and that Matty Two Hats jumped in a little bit. I hope he comes in the chat a little bit later here. I'm sure he's listening in. About why your gear won't be your retirement plan. It's so funny, that we make assumptions based upon basically the premise that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. And this kind of cognitive dissonance is what the technical term is for it, is prevalent in a lot of things. And I think that with gear, in the case of this channel, since we talk about music gear, um, is one of those things that we can really develop a cognitive dissonance on. Particularly when you talk about, and I'm going to, blow your mind on this one, that the cachet, a Fender or a Gibson, or something that people consider to be high value now, that may not be the same years to come down the line for things that we just can't see. Because again, we're thinking that tomorrow is going to be the same as today. But I think if anything in the last 5 years has proven to us that that is just not so. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. Like nobody, hardly anyone has gear that is worth real money. I'm going to talk about that too. That's a great point, and you are welcome here, Sir Blank Nobody. That is a fantastic point to bring up. Yeah, I think that is mainly true. Yeah, for real. Living Life says. Yeah, guys, we're going to talk about that. We love guitars, amps, and pedals, but what happens when we start thinking of them as investments instead of tools? Are we fooling ourselves? You know, when a plumber buys the set of tools that he needs in order to do his job, does he buy them with the thought of them as being investments for his work or being investments for his retirement? Would he still consider those same tools that he bought that somehow down the line to be worth more in value as the years go on? See, if you apply this thing, this cognitive dissonance that we have with gear to anything else, again, YouTube, my metaphor is YouTube is a cafeteria, high school cafeteria in particular. And as most high schools, there are tables, and these tables have their little cliques, and this is the gear table. But we somehow think that we live in some kind of twilight zone, some kind of phantom zone, some kind of alternative universe where everything goes up, or down the line, every piece of gear that we got is somehow going to be worth more than when we bought it. And I'm often reminded of another channel. He was a British gentleman, and he doesn't post much anymore. He was first wave YouTuber, and I caught wind of him when I was living in Singapore. So this had to be at least 5, 6 years ago. And he had a guitar collection that he was an older gentleman, and probably not too much older than I am now. And he was going through the blue book of guitars. The it's a Bible of guitars. It basically tells you the price, the current blue book price of a guitar. Um, which is interesting to me. That used to be the big thing that every dealer that I knew had one. Very very few dealers do I know have that. But I digress. And he was going through his guitar collection, and only one of them had increased in value. Only one. And he had quite a collection. And he was astounded by that. And he shot a YouTube video and he went through it and he showed the prices and what he paid for it. He had all his receipts. And I found that interesting, and I still do. It's been quite a few years since I've seen that, but you know, that's really one of the videos that I saw that was the genesis of the "I'm good." We have to do it in English here, Nima, but you're welcome. Here, you're welcome here. Um, that was kind of the genesis of the kernel, if you will, of "I'm good." Being content with what you have and not chasing hype. Because boy, when I was living in Singapore, I had the means because I was doing TV commercials, writing music for them, and they were paying me handsomely. And I felt a need to invest that money back into the studio again. So I was indulging in all kinds of indulgences. I was. You can look at my Singapore videos and see that clearly. But I saw that video and I really began to think to myself, as clever as you think you are, you just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And sure enough, not too long after that, the coup happened. That started, where we're at today. Mike, tonight I'm uploading a video about a guitar I own that someone else put on Reverb for 250K. It didn't sell as far as I know, but I had fun telling people that someone think it's worth 250K. Yeah, you can put it up for whatever you want, but is somebody going to buy it, at that price? But yeah, man, I tried to shop Music Companion. Welcome, Music Companion. I tried to shop with Sweetwater, and not one, but two sales engineers were trying to tell me how smart of a buyer I am and such guitar as an investment. I bet they were. I bet they were. That's hilarious. Oh, sorry, guys. Whoops. Had a little power failure here. That's all right. I bet they were. That's hilarious because at the end of the day, it starts to feel like when you walk into some of these music stores, it starts to feel like more of a less like you're walking to a car dealership. um, and that's not a good thing, nor is it the feeling that we want to have. And so I was thinking about this tonight, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I need to touch upon this for a couple of reasons. The first reason being that, again, we're looking at, oh, there we go. We're looking at older people and their presuppositions about what their gear is going to be worth. And I can honestly say that that really is such a gamble that I want to examine it a little bit tonight. You know, there are certainly some guitars out there in this current environment, as was just pointed out here, that can fetch big money. However, I can't say, and I will not sit here and tell you that the guitar like that is going to fetch. It's like Schrodinger's cat. Guys know that one. They've been mentioning it 1,000 times on TV, which should worry you. I can't watch a TV show that doesn't mention Schrodinger's cat, but put poison in a box, put a cat in there, put a lid on it. Till you take the lid off, there's a 50-50 chance the cat is dead or alive. It creates an alternative, a split in the universe where there's two realities, one where the cat is dead and one where the cat is alive. And, really, it's like that in a way with the future, 5 years from now. I don't know. It could be either be valued at 3 times that the value, or not even worth half that. And if anybody tries to sell you on Sweetwater any other truth than that, then they're not being truthful. Now, vintage gear does hold value, but that market is aging. Not only is that market aging, but that market is looking to offload the stuff that they bought. That's starting. Another contributing factor to why the value of guitars in Japan is going down as well, and that's a small island. The next generation doesn't attach the same nostalgia. Their heroes may not have been playing a Gibson. They may have been playing a PRS or something else. They may not have been playing a Fender like your heroes were. They may have been playing a Yamaha or something else. And so the pendulum of popularity will determine the outcomes of companies like Fender and Gibson. Why, Gibson was revived. They were on the ropes. If it was a prize fight, Gibson would have been on the ropes in the 80s. It wasn't until Slash came along and they were able to get the hype machine churning on that one and get those sales back up again. But that was 1989. I hate to tell you, kids, because I was there. Remember it very well. That was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. So collectors are selling faster than younger players are buying. As somebody just said there earlier in the chat, the fact that most cats don't have expensive gear anyway. You know, I have a few things that are vintage and of value, but most cats don't have that kind of gear, and that's not what I'm about either. So it's storming here in Texas, Music Companion says. Yeah, man, be careful with that. Be careful. Keep your eye on the alerts. Keep your eye on, anything, because that's a very risky thing to be in. My thoughts and prayers are with you on that one. My heart broke in the 90s when I found out Jimmy Page played a telly on a lot of my favorite songs. Imagine me playing Telecaster all those years, and then finding out that Prince was actually playing a Mad Cat, and a Mad Cat and a Telecaster do not sound the same at all. I was like, why can't I get that Stratty sound? And I found out that most of that stuff was done on that Mad Cat and Jesse Johnson Strat. 99% of those albums. It was not, what I thought it was. So yeah, I can dig that. Zachary, how you doing? Welcome to the chat. Welcome to this live stream, Zach. First of all, thank you so much for chiming in. Fender has relations with a lot of young artists at least, but yeah, Gibson's audience skews older. Yeah, it's interesting. I think Fender is somebody there is awake at the wheel, at the helm. I think that there's somebody there who's saying to themselves, we better try to, weasel ourselves into the younger artists, do something here because if not, you know, it's a kind of a planned obsolescence there. Michael Watson. I'm old enough and somewhat smart enough to know that all the gear I have bought in the present or past will never be worth more than I paid for it, nor hold its value. It just won't. Yeah. I older and wiser, I don't know, because you could be young and realize that too. But because and I know older people, and that's kind of the point of tonight's live stream is to point out to those who aren't hip to that fact that you just gave, that you know, you might not have the gemstones you might thought you had, you're holding on to. And when you shake off this mortal coil, you know, where is it going to end up? I've told you guys, I've seen it, I've experienced it, and there's another reason that influenced my decision on having things too. I've seen people die, and the next day their houses were just completely ransacked and gone through. Now I know as much as my and I don't want to jinx myself by saying that. As much as my uncle Carl wants to give that guitar collection to me, he's in Atlanta. I'm in in Amsterdam. Something, God forbid, happens to him, then I know that stuff is going to be gone. It's just a fact of it. There are people who are waiting around for that. That's just human nature because you have people around you that you don't know what their real intentions are. So, and I've seen so many examples of that. And why leave meat for the hyenas? I plan on starving the hyenas out. Trust me. Guitars that sold for crazy prices 10 years ago still have not recovered. From that height of 10 years ago. They sit on reverb today. They just sit there. And people ask 250K for them, and they sit there. Pedals hyped as the must-have investment. I could think of a few, like the Klon. And clones flood the market, and that actually has an adverse effect actually on the originals because you know it's diluting the market. It's counterfeiting. It's why they used to hang you for counterfeiting money because you were stealing. It's a form of theft. And I have a clone myself, so I've been a little Jesse James with it, but still, in all, that's the truth. Zach says a lot of the old musicians bought stuff from pawn shops on the cheap too, and then people lionize the gear. Yeah, yes. My Uncle Carlton, his 1972 Telly, that thing has ambered up so much that it looks like a piece of petrified wood. It looks like something that they pulled out of the La Brea tar pits. But he bought that in a pawn shop, he said, for $100. And that's just a story. He bought it across from a guitar store across the street from Manny's in New York in 1972. So, which is it was a pawn slash, music shop, but mostly music because that was where a lot of musicians were around pawning guitars, buying guitars. Same old story. Run Riot. Hey, sir, how are you doing? Good to have you here. Man, we got so many great people in the chat tonight. I always like to stop and say, if I haven't said it, if you didn't catch it in the beginning, you didn't hear it, time is one of the most precious things that you have in your human existence. And for you to spend a little bit of yours here with me is always going to be appreciated. So thank you guys so much for chiming in into the chats too. Lots of great things being said here tonight. Hey guys, hope all you've been well. Run Riot says, sorry I've been able to make it in a while. No problem, sir. Better late than never. Been pretty tired. Probably just listen in. Yeah, just listen in, man. Relax. I'll talk in my soothing voice tonight to make you feel more relaxed. I love guitars that look like they were found in the pyramids. Yeah, man, that one, that you love that one. I'll have to get a picture of that and post that one so you guys can see that. It's insane. Gear is not a 401k. At best, it's it's value preservation. Will it fight the inflation, the rate of inflation? No, but not growth. You know. Now, again, this is for older guys to say to you, there are others, Scott has made it quite clear that he plans on going out on they're going to make a bonfire of his guitars and put his body on it. And that's okay. I still say that thinning the herd wouldn't help, wouldn't hurt. And I think that all of us could just probably do a spring cleaning in the fall. At least consider it. And I understand there's the emotional versus the financial value gap. I kind of touched upon this a little bit last time. Your first dream guitar, that guitar that had to be your birthday, your guitar, the one you played your first gig with, the amp that you needed so bad that you saved up for, and then you got it and realized that it just didn't sound great at all. But you kept it anyway because damn it. A plan is a plan. Well, they're dropping bombs outside the window, General. Well, we'll just continue on anyway. you know, to you, it's priceless. To your heirs, it's a piece of wooden wires that needs to be sold. And the market only values what someone is willing to pay. And sentiment, my friends, does not transfer. I will say that again. Sentiment does not transfer. I put that in here. I highlighted that. Put a little stroke underneath it in my notes because that is something that somebody said to me a long time ago. And I didn't understand it when they said it to me. Sentiment does not transfer. I understand it now. You live and you learn. Sentiment does not transfer. What was that about? It was about a car that I was trying to sell. And the guy said to me, sentiment doesn't, and that is like, you know, you know, but yeah, dig that, you know. Emotional value rises with time. Well, I've had this guitar for 40 years. Well, financial value often stagnates or drops once the collector wave passes. Again, this cognitive dissonance. Those guys who bought all those classic cars because they thought that their kids and their grandkids are going to want to drive a 1964 Studebaker. Guess what? They don't. Nor when they pull up, will anybody think that's cool? Other than the one old guy who's left sitting over in the corner, drinking his coffee. Oh, I remember that one. You dig what I'm trying to say to you? Peter's gonna crap his robe when he sees me trying to get in with all my guitars and skateboards. Good one, Scott. Speaking of old musicians, when Chris Poland was recruited for Megadeth, he worked at BC Rich, made custom guitars for him and Dave. Dave says he wishes he knew what happened to his. Yeah, man. That's a great piece of music history. Chris said he sold his for drugs. Yeah, again, That's why I was hinting upon that with the Manny's, that street. Manny's on side, pawn shop on this side. There was a lot of back and forth going between Manny's and that pawn shop that my Uncle Carlton went to for a lot of reasons. So, Port Swing Tunes. Hey, hello, Port Swing Tunes. Welcome to the live stream. Financial value stagnates, guys. And that telly that might represent 30 years of your life, but to your kids, it's an $800 sale they can make. And that's just the reality of it. And I'm not even going to get into, I'm not going to touch upon, I'm not going to digress into Chipsons because, boy, howdy, are they selling Chipsons like there's no tomorrow on Temu. Seriously, you can get a chips in SG, yeah, chips in custom, and they're not even trying to hide it. You buy that chips in and you bring it home and you're just so proud of it, and then you get hit by a bus, and you didn't do the right thing by informing your spouse or your family or writing a note or scribbling on the back of the headstock fake. You didn't do any of that. So then they take that into a shop. And hopefully, they take it to a shop that the guy can say this is a fake and do the work for you that you should have done. I said I wasn't going to digress, but I have to. Just for a moment, please allow me, guys. You haven't had decency to do that. And the other thing is that if they sell it to a private dude and he's like, "Oh, sweet man, I got myself this Gibson, but it's actually chips," and then you're counterfeiting. Remember, I told you they used to hang people for counterfeiting? Why is that? Because it dilutes the market, right? Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. If you got a Chipson right now, do the right thing. Put a stamp. I'm not saying you have to carve it in the back. You can easily get some tape, put a little fake on the back of, stick on the back of headstock, so that people know. At least that. The gap between what it means to you and its real value is where the heartbreak can occur. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that heartbreak. See, a lot of guys won't break up. Why are you still with that woman? Why are you still with her, man? She's this, she's that, she's that, and the other. Well, the heartbreak of breaking up with her. I've been with her 30 years now. I might as well go the distance because I can't bear the heartbreak of breaking up with her. And it's the same thing here. The psychological connections there are almost identical, the emotional attachments. And I'm not saying that you have to be a friggin' Vulcan about this, okay? Like, what is it? Let me see if I can do it. Live long and prosper. Don't. Yeah, I did that pretty good. Um, you know, just be pragmatic to the point where you can at least recognize what's going on there, is what I'm trying to say. People have a tendency to think about, oh, I'll deal with it later. I'll think about this later. I'll consider this, you know, at a later date. But the reality is that your kids probably in most likelihood will already be in their 60s when you pass. And they'll have their own clutter to deal with. And the heartbreak of losing you and all those things, they're going to want to wrap it up real quick. They're not going to take the time to sit down and, oh, what's this? Well, let's look it up on Reverb and see what it says about it. And okay, let's mark the value. Just what do you want for this? I'll give you $5 for all of these. Just get it out of my sight. I'm just talking about realities, guys. I mean, we're all human beings, regardless of whether you're in Japan or, you know, in Nova Scotia, or here in Amsterdam, or in outer friggin' Mongolia. We're all the same human beings, and these things play out more or less across the line. Music Companion says there is a concern about classical instruments being repaired by professional classical luthiers and not somehow putting a stamp of repair or, let's say, Stradivarius. Yes, I've heard about that. In the case of those repairs, they have to put a little stamp in there, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So you may have what you think is an authentic Stradivarius, for example, but it may have been redone XYZ amount of times. And so therefore, we just as it's the same thing with these Japanese vintage guitars. As I said, I was on my guitar safari, and I came across a Super Sounds, and you guys know I know what a Super Sounds looks like, but I could tell just by looking at the parts that had been replaced. Not everybody can do that. That's only because I've seen thousands of them. I've had hundreds of them in my hand. I know them very well. You know, I'm just saying is that there's so many in that that gets in. That's an offshoot of the Chipson argument there that Music Companion, in my opinion, is bringing up. Sean Brooks, Mr. Brooks, welcome to the house. How you doing, sir? My parents died when I was in my 30s. I'm sorry. I had to go through all their stuff. My dad was an avid gun collector, but just had lots and lots of junk. It really made me think about what I wanted. Yeah, you would it's guns, guitars. You think maybe, well, this is a very rare 45, is maybe not. And we kind of, again, it's a product of psychology. I've talked about this. That years ago they figured out that they could get you to buy stuff by triggering certain impulses in you. And one of the great things that they do is to feed you a lifestyle of collecting things. He who has the most toys wins. And it's interesting to me that in some of the most wealthiest folks' houses that I've been in my life, the wealthier the house income was, the less cluttered the house was, the less stuff they had. I kid you not. Yet on the other end of the economic scale, I've been in places where they didn't have a lot of money, but they had a lot of stuff. My personal experiences, I'm just saying. But I think that all of us, I bring that point up because most of us are on that side of the scale. And we're the consumers that they're really pushing things to. The rich, they're in their own zone. They get stuff free. And yet, you know, there's that. So we need to try to break free of that psychological bond that we need to be the consuming culture so the rich can sit in their empty plazas. Really? Think about it. Kept for my kids and have them when I eventually pass. You know, if I'd be frank with you, if I was allowed, I would have no problem with keeping a firearm around. In the states, it's a constitutional right that I think should be upheld, and it's something that you can use. Like my aunts, I was talking about in the last talk, that this is kind of part two of, about my aunt's cast iron skillets. My great aunt, that when she passed away, my mother asked me what are things I wanted, and it's one of the things I took was her cast iron skillet set, and I use them to this day, and I keep them very nice. And I hope one of my nieces, and I have no children of my own, but I hope that one of my nieces and nephews one of these days will appreciate them enough to take them as well. So There are some things like that, but for the most part, it's not that cut and dry. I have two boys, each a heirloom level amp and guitar. Nice. If they don't want to keep them, that's up to them, but that's still nice. And he who has none and reaches the top is the real one. Got you there. Got you there, Tranche. Welcome to the chat. Yeah, you know, it's just emotional attachment that we need to break free of is kind of the root of tonight's discussion. What I'm trying to touch upon is in the psychology that they've used in order to play upon that emotional attachment, the psychology we use on ourselves, the excuses that we give. But if you don't thin out your collection, you're just really, in some ways, passing the burden in one way or another. Original cast iron cookware is very collectible, can be very valuable. Yeah, these are old. These are stamped. These are from the 1950s. But I would never give them up, because frankly, I use them every day. They are the only things that I cook on. They are of great value to me because I'm not going to cook on Teflon. That's sure as hell ain't going to happen. And I think the health benefits of cast iron are something in itself. And if you try to buy them, um, I didn't have the little egg one, the one that you can cook. It's about that big. You cook a single, uh, egg in it. I didn't have that one, and I was in Bangkok, and I saw a shop in not Terminal 21, but the one down on Asuk. Uh, they were selling cast iron. I was like, wow, man! But that little itty bitty one was about $70, 60, $70. Yeah, but it's a good one. So now I have a complete line all the way up to the Dutch oven. Yeah, I think it's better to have fewer items of higher quality than lots of mass-produced, cheaply made products. Yeah, the Taimanization of the world, the 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 disposable stuff, and God knows, planned obsolescence was baked in the cake 100 years ago in consumer products. The first light bulbs that they made, some of them, and you can look this up. You can say, "Oh my, yeah, you're nuts. You've been drinking too much or whatever is in that silver cup tonight." It's orange juice, guys. Like I said, I got a cold, but some of the original light bulbs that were made are still running to this day. Over 100 years later, they're still running. And why do the ones that we have barely last, a week? Because planned obsolescence. That's a fact. The light bulbs, they can design light bulbs. They did it 100 years ago that can last forever, and yet they don't. You're drinking straight mixer? Yeah, just the mixer. It's funny. In my house, it's just called orange juice because it don't go with nothing else. But I take your meaning. There's a light bulb in Tower Bridge in London that's been lit since the 1800s. Yes, correct. Not just there, but there's a few in the States, a few in different countries, the original light bulbs. I'm just telling you guys, I mean, we're adults here. And let's look at this pragmatically. If you haven't used it in 10 years, you probably never will. Sell it now. You can enjoy the process. I remember in Singapore when we were leaving, I think I told this story. All of a sudden, somebody decided to dump a bunch of cats in my neighborhood, kittens. And I can't, if God puts something in front of me, I can't not do anything about it. So I'm out there trying to get these kittens together and find them homes. And this little Singaporean girl, finally the family decided to take it. One of the kittens, Milo, boy cat, the only boy out of four girls and a boy. I kept one. Um, and Milo went home to this little girl, and they sent me a picture of her holding him. And the smile on her face was so great that, and mind you, these cats were a little bit on the wild side. I got bit so bad trying to collect them and get them in the cage to get them out the door that while I was waving bye bye, I had my arm behind my back because blood was dripping down my hand. It bit me that bad. But when I saw that smile on that little girl's face, it was worth all the bloodshed, literally. The blood, sweat, and tears that I put into making that happen. And I think that with a guitar or an amp or a pedal in your collection going to the right person, you can experience the same thing. Keep your meaningful pieces and downsize on the other ones. And focus on what you actually use and play. I don't know, guys. I go through these periods where I haven't picked up the guitar in a month. I'll pick it up, I'll play for 5 minutes, and then I'll put it down again. And that's maybe once a week for the last month or so. And what good would it do me if I had 20 guitars? That would just be 20 guitars that I'm not going to play, you know. So, but it's a tool. And when the time comes and the spirit moves me, then it will get used. But in reality, even now, it's more than I need because right now I don't feel like playing, so I don't need any. Weird way of looking at things, but focus on what you actually play, not what looks good on the wall. I know this YouTube culture, which is a big part of it, where you got the guys with the 20 guitars on the walls and the stacks of amp as high as your eyeballs can see behind them. And I know it's part of the tables culture in order to show off your gear, but you're feeding into the consumerism, either knowingly or unknowingly. You're guilty of that. And it's like pulling your dick out. Well, mine's bigger than yours. Pull yours out. Let me see yours on YouTube. Let everybody be the judge. There are cats who you would never know what they got. I'm not kidding. The real guys that I knew that had stuff, you would never know they had it. They didn't advertise it, they didn't talk about it, but then they say, hey man, come over here, check this out. And you're like, holy, and I'm talking about not just gear, I'm talking about cars, watches, stuff like that. So don't get involved in this pissing contest because what good does it do you? What does it profit you? Sometimes it's worth keeping one or two lifers, but the point is intentionality, not hoarding. View of the Livermore, California fire station light bulbs going for 120 years. That's the one I was thinking about, Scott. You read my mind. Exactly that one. Yeah, that's the one. 120 years, kids, still working. Why is that? See, well, oh, that's cool. That's neat. That's awesome. Well, wait a minute. Why come my light bulb doesn't last 120 years? Why is that? And once you start asking why, I always said why. They always try to shut the kid up who's asking why, but generally that's the kid who does well later on in life because he's asking the questions. He's asking the correct question. Why? Cui bono? Who benefits? Have you ever given thought to Seth Lover mentoring Seymour Duncan and Ted McCarthy advertising PRS in the late 90s and early 2Ks and never PRS, never reaching out to Seymour Duncan for a collab. Yeah, yeah. There's some things going on there, but I'll be honest with you. The more I get into Seymour Duncan, some of his business, some of the things that it's just there's these guys. We put people on a pedestal, but to be honest with you, they're just again human beings, just like everybody else. You know, and that there are some issues there. It doesn't surprise me. Such inspirational speech and great mindset you have, sir. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying so. It's clarity of mind. See, once you this your mind is a crucible that you burn away all the other fluff that's of no meaning and no consequence to you. Get down to that core truth of things. And you don't get there unless you ask why. Um, I found out Sean Brooks says the vast majority of actual touring musicians have 3 to 4 guitars, maybe 2 amps and a pedal board. Yeah. The 20 guitars on the walls for people with steady income. Yeah. That's been my experience too. That's been I talked about that before. When I was growing up, the guys that I aspired to had 2 or 3, maybe 4 guitars, if you consider the acoustic guitars, or maybe 2 acoustics, 1 or 2 electrics, generally. And that was my experience. And in most of the studios I went into, that's what they would have available. If you wanted to rent or use. No need to keep up with the Joneses, eh, Mike? Yeah, because again, there's a reason why. That's a terrible thing to say, Michael. Okay, how can I phrase this where it doesn't sound like I'm being a dick? Is it possible to phrase this where you don't sound like a dick? You know, um, it really the guys' channels in our little sphere, the guitar YouTube, you know, area of the cafeteria. The guys that have all the stuff on the wall, of course, I think that they're going to get more viewers and they're going to get promoted as a result of that. And it's kind of a self-eating kind of thing. So it gives the guys who are starting in the impression that they need to develop a wall full of guitars so they can get their channel going. So again, it just spins and feeds on itself. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what to say. My phone is from 2009 on original battery. Again, I ran into a guy, good friend of mine, Jerry, manager down here at a restaurant down the street, and I walked in and he said, "Hey, Mike, get lunch." He said, "Hey, Mike, look at the new iPhone 17 or whatever." I said, "Oh, nice, nice, nice." I said, "Something wrong with your old phone?" He says, "No, no, 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 no. I get the new one every year. Trade in the old one, get some money back, and get the new one." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, no, I didn't say why because I didn't want to offend him. Because the minute he sensed that I was going to say why, and I could feel him getting apprehensive, like, is this guy going to criticize me?" I said, "Well, is there any difference?" I pivoted and I said, "Is there any difference between that one and this one?" He says, "Oh, no, 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 no. Basically the same. Camera's a little better." I said, "All right, man." He says, "Well, I don't have any kids, so I don't. This is my supplement money. It's kind of my thing." I said, "Hey, man, everybody's got their thing. You know, at least it's not hunting people for sport." you know, but I found that interesting. You know, some cats can keep their phone. Me, I've had mine for a while. Works fine. Knock on wood. But some cats got to change it every year because a light bulb that lasts 120 years costs more to run in electricity per year than it is to just buy the new bulbs that use almost zero electricity. True, but that bulb, as I believe when I was reading the history of it, uh, its usage, electricity usage was very low. And the fact of the matter is that with modern light bulbs, you're not getting the efficiency in terms of lumens out of them that you would get out of the older bulbs as well. They're efficient with the energy that they consume, but the lumens aren't as significant. It's you ever walk into a room and it's just got that kind of, it's lit, but it's dim, a dim lit. That's a lot in Japan because those guys, they live for fluorescent lights. But I see your point there, Sean. Maddie Two Hats. Man, I was just talking about you. Maddie, actually, tonight's discussion is born from a comment that you made in the last live stream. So, yeah, gear tubers, Sean says. Yeah, gear tubers. Great, great, great one. I like that one. I'm going to use that one. Music companion. I mean, really, everyone should have a polka dot Concord on their wall. Yeah. When I want to critique someone, I start by saying, I love you, brother Bud. I love you, brother Bud. Well, it's all right if the love is real. If you're saying it out of real love, then that's all. That's a good place to start. But some people don't want to listen either. Some people can't receive it. You have to have a spirit to receive it. And sometimes you can't manifest that. When I went to critique someone, yeah, uh, incandescent looks the best. Yeah, again, I can't stand fluorescent light. I couldn't stand those energy efficient light bulbs they started selling in Japan when I was living there. I literally would bring light bulbs from other countries back with me when I was living in Japan because I hated the Japanese light bulbs. They were just dim and it just made everything look washed out. Dharma, yeah, I remember you, Dharma. Welcome back. Dharma, you were nice last time you came in. Why you gotta say that, man? We were friends from school. We were both were gays. I don't think that term in the context that you're using it has a plural form. The gays. Well, there's Marvin Gaye. Oh man, Darwin, you were nice last time. Why you come back being so mean? Mr. Smith, hey dude, I finally found you again. How's everything? Mr. Smith, everything is fine here. It's just the chat is cracking me up right now. I'll tell you something, I've got the funniest, smartest, chat out there. You guys never cease to lift my spirits. Unknown, hello to you too. Man, you made me laugh. You're so funny. Be nice, though. You were nice last time, man. Be nice. I'm glad to see you, Dharma. Good to see you, man. That made me laugh. Unknown says hello. Why are the Gibson 500T 509 area favorite pickups? Because of the tone of them. And by the way, nice question, Rick. Um, I don't think that the ones presently being made are as good as the original set when they came out. I can't tell you why. Played a guitar that I had. I love that time. I played an almost identical guitar to it with a later, more recently made set, and it just didn't dig the same. It didn't sound the same. I know there's other things in there, but still, all in all, uh, that's so it's my favorite with a caveat. There's a little, asterisk next to that says it's got to be an older set, a much older set, like when they first came out. That's my opinion. It may have been the caps and no, no, no. It was almost identical, same guitar. Yeah. Sean Brooks, have a good evening, everyone. I got to run, but I'm going to subscribe. Thank you, Sean. I like these live chats. I like having you here, Sean. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to show up and listen in. Thank you. God bless you, sir. Have a good one. You know, gear will not fund your retirement. And emotional value really equals financial value. And don't think that decluttering is a loss. Think of it as one of your responsibilities. So the responsibility that so few people are willing to take because so many people are afraid of the subject of I'm going to die. We're all going to die, kids. Guess what? We're all going to go one day. Get over that and say, what are the responsible things that I can do? Once you can get over that, then you'll be amazed how, you know, free your mind and your ass will follow. you know. I'm good means knowing when I'm good saying, have I decluttered? Am I leaving a burden behind? No, I'm not, so I'm good. Use a companion. At some point, Gibson went to machine wound pups like DiMarzio. I mean, sorry, machine wound. Sorry, it's getting late. Machine wound pups like DiMarzio has for 20 some odd years. I think only Seymour Duncan and Bare Knuckle still do hand wound, sometimes on. Also, throwback. They have the two or three of the original winding machines from Gibson back in the day, so they do that. Rick says, I installed the SDJB and 59 in my Les Paul Studio Lite, and they just sounded less spongy, but they definitely have less power. I'm thinking about putting them back in. What do you think? You have to go with what your ear tells you. You know, sound man is one man's ceiling is another man's floor. You got to which one hits you. When you hit it and you play it, you're like, "Ooh, that feels good." Which is the one that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up? That's the one. That's my best advice. Cast Music Journey. I have a set of 498 on my tribute. I'm not a fan. I can make them work, but there's not dynamic range in it. There's nothing between clean and metal. Does that mean? Yeah, that's what I mean. There was more articulation. And that set that I had, that I am just so angry that I did that I let those go. Swapping pickups and being cute and not being able to swap back before I sold the guitar. But I haven't. But it may have just been that set. They may have been, a Monday set. It's like Monday, the guy's ready to go to work and do his thing, and he's all bright and shiny. By Friday, he ain't doing so great. But this was, it wasn't a Friday set; it was a Monday set. Is the way I look at it. Doesn't Heritage have Gibson's old Kalamazoo winders still in use? I do believe, you're welcome, Rick. I do believe, like I said, Throwback has them, has at least some of them. Use a companion. Props to Throwback. They actually talked about my question, Bill Lawrence and him, DiMarzio. Long history between them. Yeah, they're good cats there. Throwback. They're decent. They're decent men. And if I could afford it, I'd buy a set of their pickups. I wanted to buy a set of Throwbacks, but I couldn't afford it. I went with the Q pickups, which were half the price at the time. And I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I love those Q pickups. They're hand wound as well. But yeah, dig that. We love guitars, amps, and pedals, guys, but we're fooling ourselves when we think of them as investments or retirement plans. And I think I touched upon tonight a lot of the emotional and psychological reasons why we may get into that trap. But again, you know, view it as a responsibility. If you're gonna look at it like that, then I think it'll make a lot of things easier for you to do. You know, I always like to end these talks, by saying something clever, something smart. But at the end of the day, I really just have this one thought, and that is that you have to ask questions. The minute you start accepting other people's words as your or thoughts on a guitar or a pedal or an amp or an issue or a light bulb, and you're not intellectually curious enough to ask the question why, what, where, who, and how, then you're doing yourself a disservice in so many levels of your life. So I like to end with that little nugget tonight. I was watching Jim Bauer right before I came on, his most recent video. Jim Bauer is a comedian. If you ever watched the Dave Chappelle movie Half Baked, one of my favorite movies. That movie never ceases to crack me up. Never. It's just a hilarious movie. He's one of the stoner guys in that trio, and he said something so profound in his latest video that I'm still thinking about it. And but the gist of it is about using your own brain. And think about this, guys. Think about this. Think about the future. Isn't that what the Joker said? Think about the future. You know, think about your responsibilities. Tough calls we have to make, but we all have to make them to more or less. Make your calls a lot easier so it's a lot easier on the people that you love. You're a solid dude, brother. Hope to do a round table with you soon someday. I would love that music fan. I would love that deeply. I love just having all you guys here tonight to talk and have these discussions. Rick says you definitely have some great life advice, and you appreciate. Thank you, man. Thank you to every. Hey, guys, thank you for taking the time to share. One thing that Jim said was that I say every night, but he said it so much more eloquently than I could. Is that one of the fundamental human aspects that you possess is your time. And for you guys to spend a little bit of your time with me is never going to go unappreciated. So thank you guys so much. I will see you this coming up Sunday at Mike's. We'll talk about something else. I'll get off this depressing subject. I'll talk about something a little bit different. But I thought I wanted to hammer the last two live streams touching upon this because I think it's something that needs to be said. A lot of people it seems, to be afraid of this subject. Let's not be afraid of anything, guys, because fear can really lead you to the dark side. That's not. See, you guys got to watch that Jim Bauer video. Anyway, take care, guys. Have a good one. See ya.